Hi everyone, welcome to this webinar where I'm going to be telling you all about SuperCore vocabulary. We'll be looking at SuperCore 50, SuperCore 30 and the SuperCore learning grids over the next hour or so. I'm going to be telling you all about how it was designed. If you have any questions at any time, you can ask a question in the chat and we've got Emma from support who will be able to answer your questions, or we'll have some time for questions at the end as well. If you're on Twitter, you can also tweet us questions at ThinkSmartBox. We'll be checking that. Just sit back and enjoy the webinar, hopefully. Okay. So, quick overview of what we're going to look at. I'm going to just quickly go over what is Grid for anyone that might be new to Grid. Spend a little bit of time on that. I want to just talk about why core vocabulary is so important, although lots of you have probably heard about core vocabulary. And then I'm going to talk through how SuperCore was designed to support language, learning and literacy. And then I'll briefly look at how you can choose which SuperCore grid set to use. So firstly, why core vocabulary? Why SuperCore? Well, it just makes up so much of what we say. It's all of the little words like think, like, go, more, do, all of the little words that you can use in lots of different situations. We can use them anywhere, and there's also lots and lots of research into what those core words actually are. We've got research into spoken language, written language, language of preschool children, school-aged children, adults, people using AAC, children with disabilities. So there's so much research that we can look at. And it's that research that SuperCore was really based on. So we're going to go into Grid now, but just to quickly let you know, we've got Grid, which is an AAC platform you can use either in Windows or on the iPad. You can get free trials of both of them, and SuperCore is also included with both of them. So there's lots of information on our website that you can get if you want to find out more about the Grid software. So now we're going to go into Grid and have a look. Okay, so you'll see here we've got the three different SuperCore grid sets, SuperCore 50, SuperCore 30 and the SuperCore learning grids. In the webinar, we're mainly going to look at SuperCore 50 and how that was designed. Those of you who might already be familiar with SuperCore will have just known it as SuperCore. We've renamed it SuperCore 50 and made some improvements to it to make sure that it's really consistent with SuperCore 30. But basically everything I'm going to be saying about how it was designed, how it's all laid out and organised, really applies to SuperCore 30 and 50. And then at the end we'll also look at the learning grids. So we'll just open up SuperCore 50 now, and I'm going to talk you through how everything is organised so you can find your way around. Starting with the home grid now, the main thing that you can see on the home grid is a block of consistent core vocabulary. So starting on the left-hand side of the screen, we've got yellow people words, then we've got a block of green action words, we've got some blue describing words, and a block of white little words. That block of core vocabulary is based on all of the research that I mentioned at the beginning. So really, all of the words, we know these are really important. These are really high frequency, words that get used all the time, and words that you can combine and use really flexibly to talk about different things. So I can say some really simple phrases like I go.
Go.
I can start to build longer phrases.
I am going.
Like I am going, and what you'll see there is the smart grammar working in Grid 3. So it's working to try and make sure that your sentence is grammatically correct without you having to do lots and lots of work. So I can make more complex sentences like
I have
I have
been going.
been going. So we can use those different tenses quite simply using that block of core vocabulary. And we'll see later in the webinar how consistent that is and how it's on lots and lots and lots of the different grids in SuperCore. So you get a lot of repetition and opportunities to practice using that core vocabulary in different situations. So above the core, the block of consistent core, we've got this row of purple cells. These cells, I call them the useful next word cells. Sometimes they get referred to as prediction cells, but actually, when I was thinking about how I was going to design SuperCore, prediction cells really aren't that predictable because they change depending on what words you've said and what words you've said in the rest of your sentence. And some prediction engines will actually be learning about how you communicate, so the words change even more. And when you're learning AAC, what I wanted to do with SuperCore was try and think about how we can make it as easy as possible. How can we make it so that it's easy for children to learn to use and it's easy for the adults around them to learn to use as well? Because if the adults are finding it really difficult and confusing, they're not going to be confident when they're using it with the child who's learning AAC. So I didn't want to use prediction cells because they're not that predictable. So we've got these useful next word cells that change as you select a core word and move through your sentence, but they change in a really consistent and predictable way. So I can say something like,
I really
I
like it.
really like it. So every time I select
I
I get the word really, and it always appears in the same cell, so it's not going to move around. If I select any other core words, like you, okay, then we'll get that same word, really, appearing in that top row.
Really.
Okay, unfortunately, I think the sound in grid isn't quite coming through on the webinar, but hopefully you can see what I'm doing. All right, so we've got that block of consistent core vocabulary, the useful next word cells in that purple row, which really just help. You can say so much. Even an example of a longer sentence that you might want to say
I
is I want
to
see
what
you
have been doing.
So you can say, I can make quite a long sentence. I'm not having to do lots of navigation. I haven't left this grid, just using that really powerful core vocabulary. What I want to show you next is these right two columns, the dynamic columns, as they're known in SuperCore, because that is the way that I can get access to lots more vocabulary and use it alongside the consistent core. So if I go to daily, we'll see lots of different daily activities. The activity grids in SuperCore, we've got these in SuperCore 30 and SuperCore 50, and they actually form the basis of the SuperCore learning grids, really came from the idea that I had when I was talking to people on visits and parents, school teachers, lots of different professionals saying, well, it's really hard to get started with AAC. We want to get to a point where we're using AAC all day, every day, but we're day one, we've got this device, we've got a child, where do we start? And how do we find those opportunities to practice it regularly throughout the day? Because particularly in schools, it's very, very busy, or even family life can be really busy. You've got lots of other things going on. So it can be hard to think about when you're going to find the opportunities to practice AAC. So the daily activity grids are designed to address that problem so that we can say, well, actually, these are things that are going to happen every day anyway, so we can use those as our learning opportunities. If I go into something like washing, then what we see is that the core vocabulary on the left-hand side of the grid hasn't changed. That's exactly the same. All of the words are in the same place, but we've got two columns on the right-hand side now of vocabulary that's specific to the activity of washing, which is something that's going to happen every day anyway. So that you can say, using your core on the left-hand side, simple phrases.
I wash.
Like I wash. or
you wash,
you wash. Or even what you might want to do is to just use that vocabulary on the right hand side, because it's really concrete and applicable and relevant to that activity, so you can show things really easily. So you could have
towel,
your towel there and be labelling it saying towel, or you can say
water,
water and turn on the water. But it does make it easier to model that core vocabulary on the left hand side, because it's always in the same place as it is on lots of the other grids. We can start as well to make longer sentences. So an example might be,
it is wet now, and
I
want to try
it. So that's an example of a pretty long sentence. That's not going to be where we start off. We might just start off with 1 or 2 words, but it's just to show you the complexity of language that you can get to, and how SuperCore was designed not just for very early language, but to allow you to get to really much more complex language. We've also, in the activity grids, got a link to phrases that are relevant for that activity. So if I select that, we'll see some examples of the phrases linked to the washing activity.
I want to brush my hair.
For example, I want to brush my hair.
Turn the tap on.
Turn the tap on. And these phrases, wherever possible, they're linked to the word that is in that same location. So if I just jump back to the previous grid, again, you'll see that consistent core hasn't changed. That's exactly the same. And we look at that cell there, water. When I go into phrases, we've got a phrase that's really linked with that word. So, oops, let's just jump back. So we've got that turn the tap on.
Turn the tap on.
Linked in the same place as the water cell. Likewise, where we have the word towel, we've got
I need a towel.
I need a towel. Same with soap. So let's jump home now and have a look at some of the other activity grids. I'm going to show you the play activity grids. Because alongside the daily activity grids, what's really important when you're learning AAC is to have something that's motivating and fun. So we don't just want to be talking in those daily activities, we also want to make sure that it's interesting for the learner. So we've got lots and lots of different play activities down the right hand side in the dynamic columns, which work in a really similar way to the daily activities. So if I go into the bubbles activity, we get 2 columns of vocabulary related to play with bubbles that you can use with the learner alongside the consistent core. Lots and lots of repetition. What we also see with all of the activity grids is there's repetition of words across all of the different activities. Words like again appear in lots and lots of different activities because it's a really useful word. And whilst we've got really specific words in the activity grids, words like bubbles or pop, we've also got lots of core words which I've snuck in because we know that learning core words is what's going to give the AAC learner the most flexible communication. So we've got core words like up, down, big, little. These are words that we can use in lots and lots of different situations. Just like we had with the daily activities, we've got a jump to phrases. So if I go to that, with the play activities, instead of having phrases that are specific to each individual play activity, we've got a set of really useful phrases that you can use in any play scenario. So,
I want to play it again.
I want to play it again.
Will you play with me?
Will you play with me? So these phrases are really designed to support AAC learners with their interactions during play with other children or with adults. And we know that AAC learners actually find it really difficult to interact with their peers and particularly to play with them. So these phrases are really there just to help them to do that. Okay. So I'm going to jump back home now. So we've looked at the daily activity grids and the play activity grids and the consistent core. And I'm just going to show you the rest of the dynamic columns now and the vocabulary that you can access there. So next we've got chat. If I go into chat, again, just as we saw with the activity grids, we've got useful vocabulary, so single words related to chatting. So you can have some nice words to say in quick social interactions. And then we've also got phrases which are useful for social interaction. And these phrases are based on the research that looked into the different functions of early communication, the reasons why children communicate typically. So it's things like getting something to happen again.
Do it again.
So we've got do it again as the phrase. Things like saying when something's finished.
All done.
So we've got all done. So we've got quick access to those phrases for chat. We've also got a section for news, which is designed for you to personalise so that you can put in the news of the AAC learner. And it's right there on that home grid because it's really important. And what I've found is that sharing news is a really natural thing that we all do, but it's particularly motivating with the AAC learners that I've worked with to be able to come into school on a Monday morning and say what you did at the weekend, or when there's something particularly exciting happening in your life, maybe you're moving house or it was your birthday, to be able to talk about that really quickly, to have those whole phrases stored there in your device. So there's the news section. And again, it's next to this consistent core, so you can quickly use that as well. Then we've got access to concept vocabulary like position words. So we've got lots of prepositions in here and the option to expand that and get more instead of having phrases, because these next sets of words, there are lots of words in that category, we've actually got the option to just expand them out and get even more. Okay. Same with places. We've got lots of place vocabulary and the option to expand and get more of those. We've got time and feelings. So I just mentioned that these are concept words. And the reason for having those there on the top grid as well is because the research shows that concept vocabulary is really important when you're learning language, and that goes for anyone learning language. So children who are learning to speak, learning those words, those time words, position, feelings, really, really important for learning, and they're words that get used a lot in the classroom. Research also shows that AAC vocabularies haven't been that good at making sure that those concept words are easy and quick to access. So I really wanted to make sure that Supercore gave good access to those concept words. We've also got lots more concepts in Describe, which I'll show you a little bit later. So working our way down these dynamic columns, we're now on to topics. When I select topics, this is actually where all of the other fringe vocabulary, those words which are really specific, that I'm not going to use all of the time, but are very, very useful, when I select that, it takes me onto a completely new grid. So I don't have that core vocabulary there, but I can quickly get to it by jumping home. So let's just have a look at one of these topics. Going to jump into the vehicles topic. What I want to talk about now is how the vocabulary in the topic grids is organised, and it's organised according to what the words mean. So words which have a similar meaning are all grouped together, and they're grouped in these vertical columns. Words are also organised by frequency, so words that you use more often, that are more common, are quicker to get to, and they're quicker to find. So if you start on any topic grid looking in the top left corner, the first thing you're going to see is a label for what grid you're on. So I know that I'm on the vehicles grid.
Vehicle.
And I can also say the word vehicle by selecting it. And then if I carry on looking in this top left corner, I'm going to see really high frequency words. Words like car, bus, train, plane. words that might be more likely for me to use. Over in the bottom right corner, I've got lower frequency words like go-kart, crane, skateboard. I'm not going to be using those all the time, so they're over in that corner. So when the learner is exploring these topic grids, they can start in the top left corner and work their way across the grid left to right. And when they find a word that's similar to one of the words that they need, they can work their way down the column in the same way that we read from left to right, top to bottom. So for example, I can go to boat, and then I've got all of the vehicles that go on water in that column. I've also got my emergency vehicles. And I just want to show you something else about how vocabulary is organised in SuperCore now, because this is really one of the things I did to support learning and make it easier to learn where words are and also to learn what words mean. So if I select
Fire engine.
Fire engine in the top middle cell there, and then I go home, I'm now going to go into places that we saw before, and I'm going to expand it out, and then I'm going to go to buildings. And in the same cell where we had fire engine in topics, we've got the word fire station. So semantically related words that mean something similar, wherever possible, will be in the same cell or the same area of a grid.
Fire station.
Fire station there. And if I jump home, I can also now go into my people grid, which we haven't looked at yet. I've got lots of people words, but if I wanted to find a word that was related to fire engine and fire station, if I go to jobs, in that same cell, I can see firefighter.
Firefighter.
Okay, so we've got words that are semantically related always being in the same cell. And I can combine, although when I'm in the topics grid, I've just got that vocabulary there and I don't have access to my core, I can get to it really quickly by jumping home, and then I can say something like
I want my,
and I'm going to jump back to that grid that I was just on.
Fire engine.
I can say I want my fire engine. I can build on that by using some extra core.
And my.
I'm going to jump back and
Police
say,
car.
I want my fire engine and my police car. So I'm able to combine the core vocabulary with topics. We've also got a section for school vocabulary. So if we go into that, we'll see that I've got the different lessons that I'm likely to have in school, things like English, maths, science. And then I've also got access to some of that concept vocabulary I was talking about earlier on, colours, shapes, numbers. We've got a section for story vocabulary. So if I select any of these, it's going to work in the same way that the activity grids did. It's going to give me some vocabulary and then also an option to expand it. So if I go into stories, I've got vocabulary down the right hand side, and this repeats vocabulary that we have in the play activity for reading. So lots and lots of repetition. We know that that's important for learning anything. We need to have repeated chances to practice. Okay, but then if I click on more, that's actually going to expand out and give me some stories and vocabulary so that I can join in when those stories are being read. So if I choose something like Dear Zoo, maybe I'm reading a Dear Zoo story, the child can join in and select some of that story vocabulary alongside some of the core words that I've got over here, like again and next. Jumping back to the home grid now, I'm just going to finish off these dynamic columns, showing you messages. So if I click on messages, here we've got access to lots and lots of whole phrases, because whilst we had them in the activity grids, they're really, really important. So we need to have access to core words, but whole phrases are really important to be able to quickly say something, or say something that we're likely to say again and again, rather than having to always make that message manually putting all of the different words together. So words on the messages grid are organised according to what we're going to use the phrases for. And we've got labels across the bottom that help to tell us what that is. So the first column, we've got messages which relate to getting help. So maybe, as again I said with the language being organised by how high frequency it is, also sometimes it's about how important it is. So that top left cell on the messages grid is
something is
wrong. So you can quickly say that something's wrong. If I go down to the bottom of this column, I can open out that and see lots more help messages. There's also lots of space that you can add your own for personalisation. So it might be that the particular user you're working with needs to say something like they need their inhaler or some sort of medical problem. They can get help with it by putting messages on there. I can click on the cross and get back to the main messages grid. And then I want to also just show you how we've got the semantically related messages being in the same place. So messages which are related to one another are in the same place. If I go into me, so I want to talk about me, I can say things like my favourite colour, my favourite film, and these can all be personalised. But then I can go to you, and you'll see I've got questions there to say, what is your favourite film? What is your favourite colour? Okay, so really supporting that interaction and conversation skills. Let's jump home. And now, finally, in the bottom right corner, we've got access to a spelling grid with a keyboard. Now, something that's slightly different about this keyboard to other AAC vocabularies is that it's based on a phonetic keyboard. So when I select each of these letters, you actually, when you're in grid, will hear the letter sound. So we'll hear k, a, t. We'll hear the sounds rather than just hearing the names of the letters, so that children can really go in and explore letters and sounds. If they're not able to sound out the letters themselves, they need to be able to experience that, and they can do that using the keyboard grid. What you also see here is that we've got a symbol appear when I get the right word. So it's a nice bit of reward there. Okay, let's try another example. Just to see that. So once I've spelled a word, if it is a word, I'll see the symbol appear. Something we can do from this grid is to use Grid's Find Word feature. That's available on any grid set. You can add it into a grid set that you're already using, but it's built into SuperCore. If I select Find Word, it highlights the word, and then it will actually take me through the steps that I need to do to find that word. So it's highlighting the cell in the bottom left corner, people. So I select that, and it's greyed out the rest of the grid, and it's highlighting the cell up here,
Dad.
So I can learn where words are. And by doing it through the spelling grid, what I'm also doing with the learner is saying words are made up of these things called letters, and this is how I'm going to build the word, by using letters. So the person that's supporting the learner can select letters to spell out a word before going to find it and teach the location of that word. And we have also got access to other keyboards. If you want to move beyond the sound exploration, you might want to move on to having a keyboard with prediction cells. So that when I start writing my word, it can actually appear at the top. We go into other keyboards. We've also got keyboards which will tell you the letter names, or keyboards which will simply be alphabetical, and we've got QWERTY and switch frequency. There's also a grid of sounds that you can go and explore. So when I select any of these cells, I'm actually going to just hear some pre-recorded sounds. And that's important for early literacy too. Often you'll see that's one of the first lessons children have in school when they're learning literacy It's not about words and letters, it's just about listening to different sounds and talking about them, whether they're loud or quiet, long or short, what those sounds are like. So you can do that in SuperCore. Okay, so we've gone into a couple of the grids at the bottom, but I haven't talked about them yet. So I will do that now. So all I want to say really is that these cells with the plus sign at the bottom, we've got people, questions, actions, describe and little words. That's where I can go to get more of that type of word. So if I've looked down the column, I, my, it, you, and I haven't found the people word that I want, I can select this grid and get more of that type of word. So I might want to be saying
mine,
mine. And these grids will all automatically jump me back to the grid that I was on before, just to speed up communication. So if I go back into that people grid, we can always tell when a grid is going to do that jump back so that it isn't confusing, because we can see a pin in the top left corner. So that's another thing with SuperCore about trying to make sure it's always predictable. If it's a grid that's going to jump back, then you'll see that pin in the top left corner. Okay, so if I go into my questions grid, that's where I can get access to some more words for questions. You'll see this top row of 5 is really, they're all consistent with the locations those words are in on the top grid. Then if I go into actions, that's where I can get access to lots more verbs. And the verbs on this grid, so the words on this actions grid, are organised by really words that group together. Rather than having an alphabetic list, we've got an alphabetical list that you can get access to. They're organised in a way that is hopefully more meaningful to children, because you can talk to them about how those words are grouped together in a way that will hopefully make sense to them. So this first block over on the left hand side, these purple cells, these are all action words to do with thinking and talking. So we've got the word talk and think there as well, and words that are related like feel, love, hurt and cry. So they're keeping with the theme of SuperCore, where words are organised according to what they mean. We've then got this block in the middle of everyday action words, a block of doing words, and a block of moving words. Okay, and when I select any of these pluses, I'll get more of that type of word. So there's lots and lots of words that you can get to, organised by meaning and by frequency. Okay, and describe is organised in a really similar way. So when I open up describe, I've got words organised, so the most frequent describing words that I'm going to need more often are on this first grid, but then I can get access to more of any type of describing word. So this red block here, we've got describing words of things that you can see. So you can see if something is broken, you can see when something's fast, and I can get access to more of those words by selecting the link at the bottom. Okay, jumping back to the home grid, I'm going to show you one last thing now, and then we're going to have a look at SuperCore 30 and see all of the similarities between SuperCore 30 and 50. So jumping into my Magic Wand grid here, we can see a few things, but what I want to do first, jump back to the home grid, and I'm going to choose one of my action words. So I'm going to choose
stop.
Stop. The Magic Wand really was my way of trying to make it a bit simpler when you're trying to teach grammar, make it seem a little bit easier, because grammar is actually really complicated. And whilst we have got smart grammar that's working when we're making sentences, sometimes you might want to just say one word, but you might want to change the verb tense. So if I go to the Magic Wand, I can fix this word and make it so that it's the right tense. So I can say
stopped.
Stopped. Okay, let's have another example. I'm going to choose get. Then I can go to my magic wand and I can fix the word. And I can say getting. So an example of when you might want to use this is if a child is asked a question like, what are you doing? You could say go to your magic wand, choose going. And then select home, because we don't always talk in perfect sentences, and we shouldn't be expecting our AAC learners to be doing anything more than we would do when we're communicating. So if someone says, what are you doing? You can say going home, and you can change your words using the magic wand. We can also use the magic wand to fix other types of words like describing words. If I choose the word easy, I might want to fix that word to add a different ending onto the word. So I could say easier. And the magic wand will fix those words so that they're spelled correctly as well. And then the other part of the magic wand, because the magic wand is all about fixing things, and that's how we can introduce it to the AAC learner, it's also the place that you can go to fix things that might go wrong with your AAC device, because we know that AAC devices do go wrong, or you have problems with them that you need to fix. And the earlier we can start teaching AAC learners to problem solve and fix things that go wrong with their device, then the more opportunity they have to learn and practice those skills. So if I go into settings, what we see here is settings to do with the battery, to do with volume, and then also to do with the access method that's being used. So as well as being able to see the battery of your device, you've got some useful phrases to do with the battery. So you can say,
my battery is
low, or I need to charge my device. Because there's no point us doing all of the work to teach language and communication if the battery dies and no one's charged it. If we can teach the AAC learner to tell people that they need to charge the device, then that's going to be even more successful. Same thing goes for the volume of the device. So as well as the option to make it louder or quieter, we've got some phrases to say it's too quiet or it's too loud. Then over on the right hand side, you'll see there's quite a lot of different access settings being shown here, because I have all of the access methods turned on. But when you're using SuperCore, whichever access method you have selected, you'll only see the buttons that are relevant to that. So if you're not using switches and you've got those turned off, you won't see those cells on the right hand side. Okay, so that concludes the tour of SuperCore. What I'm going to do now is go out of the grid set, SuperCore 50, and go to Grid Explorer. So that's where I can keep all of my different grid sets. And I've got SuperCore 30. I'm going to open that up now for you. And as you're looking at it, hopefully instantly it looks quite familiar. Really the main difference is just that we've got bigger cells and there aren't as many per grid. So when we first launched SuperCore, it's been really popular, lots of positive feedback, but we've had a lot of people ask us, what do we do with users who can't access that many cells? So the solution for that is SuperCore 30. You've got all of the same words and all of the same phrases that you have in SuperCore 50. You can access exactly the same language, it's just that you don't have as many cells on each grid. That was really clear from the start when I was making SuperCore 30, that we didn't want to compromise on the language that you could access, because just because someone can't access that many buttons, maybe they're using eye gaze and they're not that accurate, or maybe they're using direct access, and again, it's difficult for them to access small cells. They shouldn't have to compromise on language. So again, as we had with SuperCore 50, we've got a block of consistent core vocabulary, starting on the left-hand side with people words. I can get more of any of my different types of core words at the bottom by selecting the extended core jump, so the plus, and I can get to it here.
Mine.
If I wanted to say mine, it will automatically jump me back, just as it did with Supercore 50. I can make simple sentences.
I like
it. Like it. I
want
it. But I can also make longer sentences. Smart Grammar is also going to be working to try and make my message grammatically correct. Sometimes, though, I might just need to jump off to another grid to get one of the words that isn't available on the top grid. But all of those core words that we saw in Supercore 50 in the consistent core are really quick and easy to get to. So an example might be
I am going.
I am going. So we saw how the words changed using Smart Grammar. I'm going to add on to that sentence the word to.
To. Go.
Go.
Now.
Now, I am going to go now. So you'll see I only had to jump off once to get that extra word, and I can still say a lot with this core vocabulary. On the right hand side, we've still got those dynamic columns that we had in Supercore 50. If I go into daily, I'll see the different activities. I can go into washing, and I'll see, again, we've got two columns on the right hand side of words that are related to the activity of washing. So I can say
I want water.
Water. Or I can say
it
is
dirty.
And then we haven't got all of the words from the dynamic columns in Supercore 50 on that top grid, but I can still get to them, and I can get to the phrases as well by going to more words, which will open out, give me those additional activity words and those phrases all in one grid. I've got all of the same play activities. Something which I didn't mention before is that we've got blank templates that you can use to make your own play activities if the learner that you're working with is really motivated by something else. But just to show you the similarities, I can go to the bubbles grid.
Blow bubbles
and I can
again.
Say blow bubbles again.
I
want
more bubbles.
And I can also get access to more words there by expanding it out. I've got all of the same topics that I had on the right hand side. So I've got position, places, feelings, topics and messages. And then if I select more, I've got access to time, school, chat, colours, news, all of the same vocabulary. We've got a spelling grid with all of the same letters and the option to find word. I jump home. So one thing that is different, you might have noticed between Supercore 30 and 50, is that we don't have space for that row of useful next words. But as I said before, we can access all of those words by just jumping off typically only one other grid. So I can say something like
I
go to describe
really like it.
Or I can get questions. I can say
what is it?
I've got the magic wand where I can go in and fix words and add on word endings. If I've selected a verb first and then I go to my magic wand, I'll see all of those options there along the top to change the verb.
Stopped.
So I can say stopped.
Go.
Or I can say going. And then when I go into topics, just to show you what those look like, if I go into the vehicles topic, again, we've got really high frequency words over in the top left corner. I've got plane, bus, car, bike. I've got my emergency vehicles. And just as we had with Supercore 50, words that are similar and related across different grids will always be in the same location or somewhere nearby. words that are exactly the same will always be consistent, and we know that that's important for learning and reducing the amount of new learning. So we don't want things to be moving around all over the place. So in SuperCore we have lots and lots of consistency. We've also got the grid label in the top left corner, so you always know where you are. That's the same on the other grids. So if I go into something like animals, got the grid label there in the top corner. And I've got some links off to other categories too. Something else in SuperCore 30, although we have to have more grids to fit in the same amount of vocabulary, there are never grids where you have to scroll through lots and lots of pages of vocabulary, because it makes it quite easy to get lost and it makes it difficult to learn navigation. So if I go to something like technology, I've got a main grid of technology and a link to get to the second grid, but I never have to go through lots and multiple grids and try and remember if that word I wanted was on the first, second, third, fourth page. We never have that in SuperCore 30 or 50. Okay, we've got our whole messages. Again, all of the same messages that we had in SuperCore 50 are available in SuperCore 30. And again, there are some spaces to add in your own phrases. Okay, so that's SuperCore 30. I think I've shown you everything and how there's a lot of similarity and how all of the words are the same. So I'm going to jump back into Grid Explorer and show you the SuperCore learning grids. Really, I won't spend too much time on this because all they do is take out that vocabulary from the daily activities and the play activities and simplify it further so that you've got somewhere you can get started and get going with AAC. So if I just go into, we've looked at the washing grid, so I'm going to go into that one to keep it consistent for you. That right hand side of the grid is all of the core and the activity vocabulary that I had before, and then the left hand side of the grid is a really simplified version of the consistent core. We've got words like want, stop, like. Those three words are in the same location, in the same block that they are in SuperCore 30 and 50. So if you do start with the learning grids, you don't have to relearn everything when you go up to the next grid set. I can use this
I want water.
To make some sentences, phrases, I want water. Or what they're really designed to do is to give AAC learners something they can explore when they're first starting with AAC. So they might just be selecting words and listening and hearing what they say, and that's absolutely fine. That's a really, really important part of learning, to just be able to explore that language and see what the words sound like, but also see how people around them respond when they select those words in the activity. I'm gonna jump back into learning grid. So I meant to show you the 12 cells. Let's just have a look at the washing grid 12 cells so we can see it's been simplified even further. So we've still got activity specific language on the right hand side, and then we've got an even more simplified core on the left hand side. So we've got want, stop and more. And let's just jump back to the home grid. We've got all of the same play activities that we had in SuperCore 30 and 50, and these have been really, really successful. Just a place to start with AAC. So if I go into play, we've got lots and lots of activities that are really motivating, and what you can do with the learning grids is to print them off and use them as low tech so that they can be with that activity, and you can explore the language using that low tech, or you can have it on your high-tech AAC device. So talking about which of the SuperCore grid sets you would choose, if I go back to Grid Explorer, SuperCore 50, I mean, I'm really keen that we give as much language to learners that they can manage. So if you've got a learner that can access this many cells, then just try it out. Just try SuperCore 50 and see how they get on, giving them lots and lots of time to explore lots of time to practice, and also making sure that we do lots and lots of modelling and we show the AAC learner how to get to all of those words. Going back to Grid Explorer and into SuperCore 30. SuperCore 30 is ideal if you've got someone that can't physically manage that many buttons, or perhaps if they've got really significant difficulties with attention and they find having that many buttons really distracting. You can also have a look at SuperCore 30 and see if they're able to manage that better. It's not really designed so that you start with SuperCore 30 and move to SuperCore 50. You can do, and it might be the case that you try out both and you just want to spend a bit of time seeing which one ultimately is going to be better. But it's not a progression. You can absolutely go in and start at SuperCore 50 if that's appropriate for who you're working with. Equally, when you've got users who are just at that really early exploration stage, they're just wanting to get started with AAC, it might be that they're ready linguistically for something more complicated. They actually understand lots of words, but they're still developing their access method, still learning how to use eye gaze or still learning how to use switches. Then SuperCore Learning can be a really useful place to start having access to language in different activities in a way that you can be practicing your access method and building up confidence. That's another thing that the SuperCore Learning grids are really good for. So I'm going to switch back now to PowerPoint. There we go. And I'm just aware of the time. I really want to make sure we've got time for some questions. So I'm going to skip through. I'm going to skip through this, unfortunately. So you can always look back at this afterwards. Summary of features. These are the things we've talked about. We've got lots of features that are supporting language learning and literacy. There's lots more information on our website about all of those things. The manual goes through the language learning and literacy features, so do have a look at that. You can download that from our manual. But now we have got about 5 minutes. If we've got any questions, I can see lots of. Here we go. So, okay, so this is a great question. So someone has asked, can you edit words? So could you take out the word bubbles? So if you're on the activity grids and you wanted to change it to a different activity, absolutely. So grid allows you to edit any of the cells. I would suggest that you don't edit the core words because those have been really carefully selected and organised, but absolutely in the activity grids, you can change those words. And also in the topic grids, I would encourage you to add in any words that are important for that particular learner. There's more of that in the manual, some advice on how to personalise SuperCore and add in your own words. So do have a look at the manual. Then we also have a question about composing email in SuperCore. So currently SuperCore doesn't have access to email within the grid set, but in grid we have got email and simple email grid sets that you can download and use. Probably the best thing for that I would say is to contact our support team, and they can really talk you through the specifics of how you might set up email with SuperCore. Okay, got one other question, which is a really good question, is does SuperCore come in PCS? Yes, it does. So the grids that I was showing you is using widget symbols, but if you want to download the PCS version, then you can do that just by going to the Add Grid Set menu at the top of the screen in Grid. Just scroll down to the bottom and you'll see the alternative version. So we've got PCS. Have we got any other questions? No? Fantastic. Okay, so we'll finish. Also, I think we have a last minute question coming in from someone. Let's wait for that to be passed over. Let's have a look. So someone is asking about adding personalised vocabulary and keeping it in a logical place. As as I mentioned, there is information in the manual about personalising, which talks about where you might add in specific vocabulary. So I'd really say have a look at that. And then if you do have any other questions, if the manual doesn't quite answer that question, then my contact information is on the screen there. Please do drop me an email. I love hearing from people and how you're getting on with SuperCore, and any questions as well. And if any questions do get sent to me, then I'll post those in the Facebook community so that other people can see the answers as well. So thank you very much for listening. I'm Daisy Clay. I'm the AAC Resources Manager, so I manage our other AAC resources as well as SuperCore. And you can just get in touch with me, or you can contact our support team with any other questions. Thank you very much.